First of all, I'd just like to respond to the question posed by the theme of the colloquium, which is, can we arrest the decline of Western civilization, and if so, how? So I just want to start by giving perhaps a very simplistic answer, which is yes, I think we can. However, it would require a widespread return to faith in Jesus Christ and to Christianity, which was the foundation of Western civilization. And this is not impossible, because with God all things are possible. And there are some signs of hope, such as the recent rise in young people around the world being baptised into the Catholic Church. However, it has to be acknowledged that the current state of Western civilization doesn't look promising. And this is particularly evident when you consider that many today, especially those in positions of authority, don't seem to know how to define the term woman. Even self-proclaimed feminists like our former PM Julia Gillard refuse to offer a definition for the group of people that they claim to be advocating for. So I would suggest that part of the effort to arrest the decline of Western civilization has to be a return to acknowledging reality, including biological reality, and also an appreciation for sexual difference between men and women, for sexual complementarity, and for the particular gifts of both masculinity and femininity, and how both are vital to the flourishing of human society. From a spiritual perspective, both the masculine genius and the feminine genius are vital in the battle against the encroachment of evil. So this presentation is based on my master's thesis, which I wrote on Pope John Paul II's notion of the feminine genius. And I took the novel approach of exploring this theme by looking at it through the lens of J.R.R. Tolkien's masterpiece, The Lord of the Rings. So by analysing three of Tolkien's female characters, Galadriel, Arwen and Éowyn, I sought to explore a bit further the various aspects of the feminine genius. This approach was also adopted by the German philosopher Saint Edith Stein, who sought to describe woman's soul through the lens of female characters from certain works of literary fiction. In her essays on woman, Stein explained this approach, arguing that it is through poetry that the soul is most adequately described. So it seems that Pope John Paul II, who canonised Stein in 1988, was influenced by her writings on women. Much of his thought on womanhood echoes that of what Stein had written decades earlier on the topic. So to begin with, what is the feminine genius? So Pope John Paul II wrote about the feminine genius primarily in two texts: his apostolic letter Mulieris Dignitatem, on the dignity and vocation of women, published in 1988, and his letter to women, published in 1995. Although he refers to the feminine genius in these texts, he doesn't go so far as to provide an explicit definition of it. He merely points us in the right direction by mentioning a woman's sensitivity towards the human person. So in Mulieris Dignitatem, John Paul refers to the humanising effect of the feminine genius, and he writes, "In our own time, the successes of science and technology make it possible to attain material well-being to a degree hitherto unknown. While this favours some, it pushes others to the edges of society. In this way, unilateral progress can also lead to a gradual loss of sensitivity for man, that is, for what is essentially human. In this sense, our time in particular awaits the manifestation of that genius which belongs to women and which can ensure sensitivity for human beings in every circumstance, because they are human, and because the greatest of these is love." So in his letter to women, John Paul wrote that while progress in human societies is often measured according to science and technology, much more important is the social and ethical dimension, which deals with human relations and spiritual values. He wrote, "In this area, which often develops in an inconspicuous way, beginning with the daily relationships between people, especially within the family, society owes much to the genius of women." Later in the same document, John Paul wrote that in seeking to discern the full truth about women, it is necessary to emphasise the genius of women, not only by considering great and famous women of the past or present, but also those ordinary women who reveal the gift of their womanhood by placing themselves at the service of others in their everyday lives, for in giving themselves to others each day, women fulfil their deepest vocation. He encouraged women to seek to discover what it means to speak of the genius of women. So rather than defining it himself, he wanted women to explore the topic and to figure out for themselves what it meant. Not only in order to be able to see in this phase a specific part of God's plan which needs to be accepted and appreciated, but also in order to let this genius be more fully expressed in the life of society as a whole, as well as in the life of the church. And finally, John Paul gives us an archetype of the feminine genius, writing that the church sees in Mary the highest expression of the feminine genius, and she finds in her a source of constant inspiration. So from this, we can determine that the feminine genius is a sensitivity towards the human person, which consists of a focus on human relations, on making a gift of oneself through service to others and a service of love. John Paul was clearly arguing that the feminine genius has an important humanizing effect on society, placing the person at the centre rather than technology, efficiency, or progress. So then the question can be raised, why are women particularly gifted in the area of sensitivity towards persons? This is precisely because of their orientation or calling to motherhood. John Paul wrote that motherhood implies from the beginning a special openness to the new person, and this is precisely the woman's part. This openness is stamped in the very being of a woman. Pope John Paul wrote, "Scientific analysis fully confirms that the very physical constitution of women is naturally disposed to motherhood, conception, pregnancy, and giving birth, which is a consequence of the marriage union with the man." So therefore, all women have this orientation towards motherhood and this openness towards persons. For women who become mothers in the physical sense, the act of biological motherhood can heighten this openness and sensitivity even more. And to quote John Paul, he said, "Motherhood involves a special communion with the mystery of life as it develops in the woman's womb. And further, that this unique contact with the new human being developing within her gives rise to an attitude towards human beings, not only towards her own child, but every human being, which profoundly marks the woman's personality." Edith Stein expressed something very similar when she wrote, "The mysterious process of the formation of a new creature in the maternal organism represents such an intimate unity of the physical and spiritual that one is well able to understand that this unity imposes itself on the entire nature of woman." According to Catholic anthropology, the human person is a unity of body and soul, with the spiritual soul being the form of the material body. This means that the soul gives life to the body and is the organising principle of the body, making it a particular type of body. This means that motherhood, like fatherhood, is both spiritual and physical. If the soul is the form of the body, then a woman's body tells us about her spiritual essence. Since a woman's body is clearly intended for conception, pregnancy, childbirth, child nurturing, we can say that she is called to make a gift of herself through motherhood, whether spiritual or physical motherhood. So to conclude this section, we can say that while both men and women can certainly have a sensitivity towards a person, for the woman it is more of an innate orientation of her entire being, body and soul. And this is why sensitivity towards the person is her particular genius. And so now I'll move on to analysing Tolkien's female characters in order to flesh out a bit more this concept of the feminine genius and what it might look like. So I'll just start with Galadriel. So Galadriel is an elvish princess, and she's arguably the most powerful figure in the whole of Middle-earth, fighting on the side of good. Belonging to the race of elves, Galadriel is blessed with immortal life and gifted with magical or spiritual and prophetic powers, allowing her to see into the future and to discern the inner disposition of others. Tolkien considered Galadriel a figure of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He wrote, "I think it is true that I owe much of this character to Catholic teaching and imagination about Mary. It is significant that the members of the Fellowship of the Ring enter Lothlorien, the land of the Lady, just after they have suffered a devastating blow to their mission. Their leader, the wizard Gandalf, has fallen in the mines of Moria and is presumed dead. The Nine arrive in Galadriel's kingdom distraught and exhausted. While Galadriel's husband Celeborn greets them courteously, he soon becomes suspicious of Gimli the dwarf because of a long-standing animosity between the race of elves and the race of dwarves. He comes to regret welcoming Gimli to Lothlorien. However, Galadriel says to him, 'Do not repent of your welcome to the dwarf. If our folk had been exiled long and far from Lothlorien, who of the Galadrim, even Celeborn the Wise, would pass nigh and not wish to look upon their ancient home, though it had become an abode of dragons?' So she speaks with admiration of the ancient structures built by the dwarves and refers to them by their dwarvish names, showing a sensitivity towards Gimli's race and culture. So Tolkien wrote of her, "She looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes, and it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy and saw there love and understanding." So love and understanding. Here we see the feminine genius in action. Pope John Paul wrote that perhaps more than men, women acknowledge the person because they see persons with their hearts. They see them independently of ideological and political systems. They see others in their greatness and limitations. They try to go out to them and help them. So in this scene, Galadriel is seeing past Gimli's race and his decisions and his mistakes, and instead she sees him with her heart. But what does it mean to see someone with your heart? Well, she emphasises with his personal situation and the immediate predicament in which he finds himself. Edith Stein believed that the faculty of empathy is more sensitive in women than in men. She defined empathy as the perceiving of foreign subjects and their experience. Stein considered the woman's gift for empathy as arising from the emotions which occupy the centre of her being. And she wrote, "The strength of woman lies in the emotional life. This is in accord with her attitude towards personal being itself. For the soul perceives its own being in the stirrings of the emotions." At the end of the fellowship's first audience with Galadriel, we read that she held them with her eyes and in silence looking searchingly at each of them in turn. Her penetrating glance not only makes them uncomfortable, it also poses a question, stirring their consciences. Samwise Gamgee says, "I felt as if I hadn't got nothing on, and I didn't like it. She seemed to be looking inside me and asking what I would do if she gave me the chance of flying back home to the Shire, to a nice little hole with a bit of garden of my own." Further on, Tolkien wrote, "Each had felt that he was offered a choice between a shadow full of fear that lay ahead and something he greatly desired. Clear before his mind it lay, and to get it he had only to turn aside from the road and leave the quest and the war against Sauron to others." So seeing others with her heart, that is with empathy, Galadriel is able to discern the conflicts in the heart of each of them, and this puts before them a choice between their own will, doing their own will, or doing the will of God by acting out of self-sacrificial love for others. This encounter with Galadriel is pivotal for the Fellowship of the Ring. It strengthens them for the perilous journey ahead. It confirms them in their decision to take the path of self-sacrificial love instead of returning to self-seeking and comfort. It helps them to choose the good and continue on their journey to Mordor with Frodo in order to destroy the ring and defeat the Dark Lord. So now I'll move on to the second character, which is Éowyn. So Éowyn of Rohan is a warrior princess, and she's perhaps the most interesting of Tolkien's female characters. She is not elvish but a mortal woman, and therefore the society she lives in is more like our own fallen world. Éowyn is the only prominent female character depicted in the context of domesticity and family life. We see her caring for her aging uncle, King Theoden, who refers to her as sister-daughter. As a woman in a male-dominated warrior culture, Éowyn is marginalised and underestimated. However, she carries out one of the most heroic acts in The Lord of the Rings. She rides into battle in a scene reminiscent of St. Joan of Arc, and she defeats the Dark Lord of the Nazgul, the Dark Lord's most powerful servant. This is a mighty blow against the forces of evil and allows the mission of the Fellowship of the Ring to advance towards its aim. Éowyn exhibits her feminine genius when she empathises with the hobbit Merry, allowing him to ride into battle with her after the king forbade him to do so because of his small stature. Éowyn sees Merry with her heart and knows intuitively that his great love for the king may prove more beneficial on the battlefield than the skills of a great warrior. She is proved correct, for it is Merry who helps her defeat the Lord of the Nazgul. Éowyn could empathise with Merry because she also was told that she could not ride into battle, in her case because she was a woman. So Éowyn's defining moment is her defeat of the Lord of the Nazgul. Rather than one of the many worthy male characters in Lord of the Rings, Tolkien chose Éowyn, a mortal woman, to defeat the leader of Sauron's army. Her sex is highly significant at this pivotal moment in the narrative. Disguised as a man, Éowyn stands alone on the battlefield, face to face with the Lord of the Nazgul. She is the only one willing or able to defend the dying King Theoden. When the Lord of the Nazgul sneers at her, telling her, "No living man can kill him," she laughs in return, announcing defiantly, But no living man am I, you look upon a woman. Eowyn I am, Eowyn's daughter. So her feminine soul cannot be hidden any longer. Its power and beauty shine forth as we read. The helm of her secrecy had fallen from her, and her bright hair, released from its bonds, gleamed with pale gold upon her shoulders. Demonstrating her great self-sacrificial love for her uncle, the king, Eowyn tells her enemy, "You stand between me and my lord and kin. Living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him." Then, with strength belying her slender stature, she cuts off the head of the great beast, and then with a broken arm she drives her sword between the crown and the mantle, killing the Lord of the Nazgul. Drawing upon the prophetic words of the proto-evangelium in the book of Genesis about the seed of the woman crushing the head of the serpent, John Paul emphasized the role of women in the defeat of evil. He wrote, "The two female figures of Eve and Mary are joined under the name of woman." The words of the proto-evangelium, reread in the light of the New Testament, express well the mission of woman in the Redeemer's salvific struggle against the author of evil in human history. According to John Paul, the moral and spiritual strength of a woman is joined to her awareness that God trusts the human person to her in a special way. It is precisely the feminine genius, a woman's innate sensitivity and orientation towards the person, that is her most potent weapon against evil. It predisposes her for self-sacrificial love, giving her a spiritual courage and strength. John Paul wrote of women during Christ's passion that in this most arduous test of faith and fidelity, the women prove stronger than the apostles. In this moment of danger, those who love much succeed in overcoming their fear. So Eowyn stepped onto the battlefield disguised as a man, but it was her feminine genius that gave her the spiritual strength to defend her uncle the king and defeat the powerful enemy. It was her love for the king that gave her moral strength against evil, not her skills as a warrior. And finally, the last character is Arwen. So Arwen is very much a figure of woman as bride in The Lord of the Rings. And some argue that her act of self-sacrificial love is in fact the greatest in the entire story. As an elf who marries the mortal man Aragorn, she renounces her immortality in doing so. His desire to marry Arwen is what inspires Aragorn to wage war against the forces of darkness and take up his birthright as the King of Gondor. He is so attracted by her feminine beauty that he is willing to sacrifice himself for many years in order to earn her hand in marriage. It is their marriage towards the end of The Lord of the Rings that brings healing and peace to Middle-earth, following the defeat of the Dark Lord. When Aragorn first meets Arwen and falls in love with her, he is enraptured by her beauty, and it's a beauty that's both physical and spiritual. We read that nothing compared to her dignity and loveliness, and he saw the elven light in her eyes and the wisdom of many days. So it's not just her exterior that attracts him, but the wisdom and light in her eyes. It is her entire feminine being, body and soul. In his letter to women, John Paul makes a connection between the woman's orientation and sensitivity towards the person and a spiritual beauty particular to her. When he speaks of the woman's genius in being able to see others with her heart, he says, "In this way, the basic plan of the Creator takes flesh in human history, and there is constantly revealed in the variety of vocations that beauty, not merely physical, but above all spiritual, which God bestowed from the very beginning on all, and in a particular way on women." In his thought about a woman's vocation as a wife, John Paul emphasized her gift for receptivity. He wrote, "The bridegroom is the one who loves. The bride is loved. It is she who receives love in order to love in return." So it is Arwen's feminine soul, her feminine genius, which gives her a spiritual beauty, causing Aragorn to love her and desire to marry her. By receiving Aragorn's love and returning it, Arwen effectively joins her life to his, and therefore his mission also becomes hers. Once they have plighted their troth to each other, Arwen immediately focuses Aragorn's attention on the battle against evil, for she knows his high calling. She says, "Dark is the shadow, and yet my heart rejoices, for you, Estelle, shall be among the great whose valour will destroy it." She expresses confidence in his ability to defeat evil, something that Aragorn himself doubts. He responds to her, "Alas, I cannot foresee it, and how it may come to pass is hidden from me, yet with your hope I will hope." Following the defeat of Sauron, the marriage of Aragorn and Arwen is an event of cosmic scale, like the wedding feast of the Lamb in the book of Revelation. When Frodo sees Arwen enter Gondor, he is moved with great wonder by her beauty, and he says, "At last I understand why we have waited. This is the ending." Her arrival evokes imagery of both the woman clothed with the sun and the bride adorned for her husband in the book of Revelation. We read that together they went up into the high city, and all the stars flowered in the sky, and Aragorn the King of Lesser wedded Arwen and Domiel in the city of the kings upon the day of midsummer, and the tale of their long waiting and labours was come to fulfilment. In fact, Tolkien makes explicit the connection between their marriage and the defeat of evil in Middle-earth. He wrote, in the year of the fall of Sauron, he took the hand of Arwen and Domiel, and they were wedded in the city of the kings. So just to conclude, hopefully this brief outline of John Paul's notion of the feminine genius has conveyed that the feminine genius is a sensitivity and an openness towards the person, and that is due to the woman's orientation, body and soul, towards motherhood. And hopefully by exploring how the feminine genius operates in Tolkien's work of fiction, we can contemplate a bit more on how we can see different aspects of the feminine genius playing out, such as seeing others with a heart, with empathy, with spiritual strength and spiritual beauty. And that it not only humanises society, but also complements masculinity in overcoming evil. John Paul pointed to the Blessed Virgin Mary as the highest expression of the feminine genius. This means the feminine genius was central to Christ's mission as Redeemer, since the incarnation took place because of the sensitivity and openness of a woman, the woman. Considering Mary as the new Eve alongside Christ, the new Adam, John Paul viewed Mary as the full revelation of all that is included in the biblical word woman, a revelation commensurate with the mystery of the redemption. So I'd just like to conclude by saying that the feminine genius, I think, will be indispensable in any endeavour to arrest the decline of Western civilization, because it places the human person and his or her dignity at the very centre. We need more women to accept their God-given mission and to embrace and step into their feminine genius, which is opposed to much of modern-day feminism. In an age of dehumanisation through AI technology, online pornography, consumerism, narcissism, we need more people, more women able to see others with their heart. Thank you.